The kitchen was alive with the sounds of clattering dishes and the gentle hum of the dishwasher. I stood by the sink, rinsing off a plate, while Emily organized the leftovers in the fridge. The soft glow of the overhead lights created a cozy ambience, the kind that usually enveloped us in a sense of contentment. But tonight felt different. I had just finished drying my hands when I turned around and caught Emily leaning against the counter, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "You'll never guess what I'm doing this weekend," she said, her tone light and teasing. I leaned against the kitchen island, curious. "What? Another wine and paint night with Sarah? Or maybe a spontaneous trip to the beach?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Nope. I'm going on a date." I blinked, thinking she was joking. "A date? You're kidding, right? With who exactly?" Her eyes flickered with a hint of annoyance. "I'm serious, Tom. It's with Jake from accounting." I felt my stomach drop. "You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? Tell me this is a joke." Emily crossed her arms, and her expression hardened. "It's not a joke, and I don't appreciate you laughing. It's just for fun." "For fun?" I echoed, trying to process her words. "You think going on a date with someone else is just fun? We've talked about boundaries before, Emily." "I know we have, but this isn't what you think," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "I just want to feel alive again. Everything feels so routine. I thought you would understand." "Understanding what? That you're going to dinner with another man? This isn't just a casual thing, it's a date. It means something." My frustration bubbled to the surface, and I struggled to keep my voice steady. "I thought we had an agreement about this." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the tension in her posture. "It's not like I'm leaving you. It's just one date. Why are you making this into such a big deal?" "Because it is a big deal," I nearly shouted, clenching my fists. "You're crossing a line, Em. What happened to us?" "I'm trying to bring some excitement back into my life," she said, her voice softening, but there was an edge to it that I didn't like. "Don't you ever feel bored? Stuck?" "I'm not the one planning a date with someone else," I shot back. "We can find ways to spice things up together." Emily sighed, her shoulders drooping as she looked away. "You just don't get it. This is about me wanting to explore, to feel different. It doesn't mean I don't love you, but it does mean you don't value our marriage enough to think about how this affects me," I countered. "What if something happens? What if you fall for him?" She rolled her eyes, clearly exasperated. "That's not going to happen. It's not like that." "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" I leaned closer, searching her face for some sign of remorse or understanding. "How am I supposed to trust you when you're doing something like this?" Emily turned away, running a hand through her hair, frustration radiating from her. "I can't believe you're making this into such a huge issue. It's just dinner, Tom." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "You think it's just dinner, but it feels like so much more. You're willing to risk everything we've built for a night out? For what?" She opened her mouth to respond, but instead, she just shook her head and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of dread. The evening dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. As I washed the last of the dishes, I found myself staring out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The familiar sights of our neighborhood felt alien, and I wondered if I would ever see them the same way again. Hours later, as I climbed into bed, Emily was already asleep, her back turned to me. I could hear her soft breaths, and for a moment, I considered waking her up to talk more, to try to make her see my perspective. But I stopped myself, realizing that I didn't know if I could handle another round of the same arguments. As I lay there in the dark, anxiety gnawing at my insides, I felt a chill creep into my chest. The joke she made, what I'd hoped was just a joke, wasn't a joke at all. It was a threat, a possibility that loomed over us like a storm cloud ready to burst. I closed my eyes, wishing for sleep, but knowing deep down that the real fight was just beginning. The days following Emily's announcement felt like a never-ending loop of tension. I struggled to focus at work, and the weight of her words haunted me. Each time I closed my eyes, I could see her smiling at Jake, laughing, and leaning into him, as if they shared a secret I wasn't privy to. The image twisted in my gut like a knife. That Friday night, unable to stay cooped up in our house, I decided to meet Matt at our usual bar. The dim lighting and the hum of conversation greeted me as I stepped inside, and I immediately spotted him at the far end of the bar, nursing a beer. "Hey, man!" Matt called, waving me over. He was a solid friend, someone I could always count on to tell it like it is. But tonight, I could see the concern etched across his face. I slid onto the bar stool, letting out a heavy sigh as I glanced at the bartender. "Just a whiskey, please." Matt leaned in, lowering his voice. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Emily's going on a date," I said, my voice tight. "With some guy from work." He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "What? Like, for real? Is this a joke or something?" "I wish it were," I replied, taking a swig of my whiskey. The burn felt good, at least. "She thinks it's no big deal, just something to spice things up." Matt shook his head, disbelief washing over his features. "Spicing things up? What does she think this is, a cooking show? This isn't normal, man, I know." I raked my hand through my hair, feeling the weight of frustration creeping up my spine. "I thought we had an understanding about what our marriage meant. We've been together for 10 years, and now she wants to throw it all away for a date. Have you talked to her about it?" he asked, concern growing in his voice. "I've tried, but every time I bring it up she acts like I'm overreacting. It's like she doesn't even understand how hurtful this is." "Look, maybe she's just going through something," Matt suggested. "People change, and sometimes they want different things. But that doesn't mean you have to stand for it." I nodded, appreciating his support, but my mind was racing. "It just doesn't make sense. I thought we were happy. We had our routine, sure, but it felt secure." Matt leaned back in his chair, studying me intently. "Are you happy, though? Like, really happy? Or is it just comfortable?" His question hit me hard, and I paused. "I don't know. I thought I was. But now, I'm questioning everything." As I took another sip of my drink, I watched the couples around the bar, laughing and chatting without a care in the world. A pang of jealousy coursed through me. I wanted to be in that bubble, where trust and love shielded them from betrayal. But here I was, drowning in a sea of uncertainty. "So what's the plan? Just sit around and wait for her to come to her senses?" Matt asked, breaking me out of my thoughts. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, I can't do that. I need to take action. I'm changing the locks." "What? Seriously?" Matt's eyes widened in disbelief. "You think that's a good idea?" "Yeah, I do. I can't just let her waltz back into the house after doing something so reckless. I need to protect myself." "Okay, but just know that might escalate things even further," he warned. "You could end up pushing her away completely." "Maybe I need to," I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "She's made her choice. If she wants to be with someone else, then fine. But she can't have both worlds." The anger simmering inside me felt like a volcano, ready to erupt. I knew I needed to have something concrete, something to stand on when this all inevitably came crashing down. As the night wore on and drinks flowed, I felt a strange mix of empowerment and anxiety. When I finally returned home, the house was dark and quiet, an unsettling contrast to the buzz of the bar. I tiptoed through the hall, the air heavy with tension. I made my way to the living room and set up my recording device, making sure it was discreetly hidden on the shelf. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed proof of everything, every admission, every careless word she said. If she thought this was just a game, she was about to learn otherwise. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Emily's footsteps in the kitchen. I glanced at the clock. She must have gotten up early for work. I heard the coffee machine gurgling and the faint clinking of dishes. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation. As I walked into the kitchen, she was standing by the counter, a steaming mug in her hands. She looked up, her eyes brightening momentarily. "Hey, sleepyhead. Want some coffee?" "Yeah, sure," I mumbled, grabbing a mug from the cupboard. I poured the dark liquid and took a sip, letting the warmth spread through me, though it didn't do much to ease the chill in the air. Emily leaned against the counter, watching me. I was thinking we could go out for dinner tonight. Just us, like old times. Really? After what you just did? I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but the frustration was seeping through. You think we can just pretend everything's fine? I'm not pretending. She shot back, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. I'm trying to make this work, but you need to meet me halfway. Halfway? I echoed incredulously. You think going on a date with someone else is halfway? You're breaking our marriage vows, Emily. This isn't just some casual thing. You're treating it like it's a game. It's not a game, she insisted, her frustration bubbling over. You're making it sound worse than it is. Can't you see that I'm trying to find myself again? You're trying to find yourself at the expense of our relationship. I countered, my heart racing. You need to face the reality of what you're doing. You can't just take this lightly and expect everything to stay the same. The tension in the room hung thick, a palpable reminder of the rift that had formed between us. I realized then that things wouldn't magically fix themselves with a simple dinner or casual conversation. Our foundation had cracks, and I was left to navigate the uncertain waters alone, seeking answers from friends while my world felt increasingly fractured. The days turned into a blur of tension and sleepless nights, each one bleeding into the next. Emily and I danced around each other like strangers in our own home. I could feel the gulf between us widening with every moment, an unbridgeable chasm filled with betrayal and unspoken words. I had made up my mind, this could not go on. Friday night rolled around again, and as I settled into the living room, I decided to go through my notes, preparing to confront Emily once more about her upcoming weekend with Jake. The recording device lay on the coffee table, a reminder of my determination to have evidence of her actions. I knew I would need it when I finally confronted her. I needed something tangible to hold on to, something that would give me clarity when everything felt chaotic. As I worked, I heard the sound of keys jingling at the front door. My heart raced as I quickly put away my notes, preparing for what would likely be another heated conversation. Emily walked in, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling with a mixture of excitement and guilt. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her voice upbeat, as if nothing had changed. "Yeah, I wanted to talk," I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. "We need to discuss your plans for the weekend." Emily's smile faltered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "Can we do this later? I'm exhausted and—" "No," I interrupted, cutting her off. "We need to talk about this now. You can't keep putting me off like this." She crossed her arms defensively. "Why are you making such a big deal out of it? It's just a weekend trip with a coworker." "That's exactly the problem," I exclaimed, frustration bubbling over. "You think it's just a casual thing, but it feels like you're abandoning our marriage for some thrill. What do you think this weekend is going to be? I told you, it's just a getaway to break the monotony." "I'm not abandoning you," she shot back, her voice rising. "But you are." I stepped closer, desperation edging my voice. "You're choosing to be with someone else instead of working through this with me. You think going away with him will fix your boredom? What if you end up liking him? What then? I don't know, Tom. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But this is my chance to explore something different. Why can't you just let me have this?" she replied, exasperated. "Because it's not just about you. It's about us. You can't just disregard our relationship because you feel stuck." I felt my heart racing, the anger mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. "It's like you've forgotten everything we built together." Emily shook her head, her expression a mix of anger and hurt. "I'm not trying to forget, but you're not even trying to understand my feelings. It's suffocating here, and I just wanted a little freedom." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "You want freedom? Fine. But I can't be the one to hold you back. If you think this is what you want, then go ahead. Just know that when you leave, I won't be here waiting for you." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. "You're threatening me?" she asked incredulously. "I'm not threatening you. I'm just stating the truth," I replied, my voice steadying. "You're playing with fire, and I won't get burned. If you go on this trip, I'm changing the locks." I need to protect myself. Emily's face flushed with anger, and she opened her mouth to respond, but I could see the realization dawning on her. You can't be serious. You'd really change the locks? I'm dead serious, I said, my heart pounding. This isn't a game to me. You need to understand that your choices have consequences. With that, I turned away, feeling the hot sting of tears threatening to spill. I couldn't let her see me break. I needed to be strong for myself. As I walked into the bedroom, I felt her eyes on me, a mixture of disbelief and something else, fear maybe. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Emily's voice carrying from the kitchen. I could hear her on the phone, her laughter mingling with the clinks of silverware. The warmth of the morning sun filtered through the curtains, but I felt cold inside, the dread building as the hours ticked closer to her departure. I tiptoed into the kitchen, my heart racing as I prepared for what might be the final confrontation. Emily stood with her back to me, the phone pressed to her ear. I could see her smile widen as she chatted with Jake, and a surge of anger coursed through me. This wasn't just a casual conversation, this was betrayal in its purest form. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. She laughed, her voice light. I can't wait to get away for a bit. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily, we need to talk. She turned around, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation. Can it wait? I'm on the phone. Not really, I replied, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. You need to understand what this trip really means. She rolled her eyes, clearly frustrated. Can't we discuss this later? I'm busy right now. Busy talking to him? While you're planning a weekend away with him? I stepped closer, my voice rising. This isn't just some casual chat, Emily. This is serious. Her eyes flashed with annoyance, and she lowered her voice, trying to keep her composure. You're being ridiculous. I told you it's just a weekend away. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, you're blowing our marriage out of proportion. I shot back. You think you can just run off and expect everything to be fine when you come back? It doesn't work that way, Tom, you're being controlling, she replied, her tone sharp. I deserve to have a life outside of this house. You can't keep me locked away because you're afraid. Afraid? No, I'm not afraid. I'm angry and hurt. You're choosing to disregard everything we've built, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. And if you go, you won't just hurt me, you'll hurt us. Emily took a deep breath, her expression softening just slightly. I don't want to hurt you. But I need this for myself. Can't you understand that? No, I can't understand that, I shouted, frustration spilling over. You're putting your needs above everything else, including our relationship. This isn't just about you anymore. As the tension hung thick in the air, I felt a wave of resignation wash over me. I knew then that I had to follow through on my threat. If she was willing to risk everything for a weekend, I had to show her there would be consequences. Listen, I said, my voice steady. When you leave, I'm changing the locks. I can't wait around while you decide whether or not you want to come back. Her face fell, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. You're really going to do that? Yes, I am, I said firmly, my heart racing. I need to take control of my life. If you choose to walk away, that's your decision. But I won't let you waltz back in as if nothing happened. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but I turned away, unable to bear the weight of her disappointment any longer. I walked back to the bedroom, the door clicking shut behind me. I knew the coming days would be hard, but I couldn't let her think that she could have her cake and eat it too. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart heavy with uncertainty, I realized this was the last straw. There was no going back from here. The days leading up to Emily's weekend away with Jake crawled by like a slow-moving train, each moment pregnant with tension and uncertainty. I spent the time mentally preparing for the inevitable fallout, oscillating between anger and a profound sense of loss. The closer her departure loomed, the more resolute I became in my decision. I had to protect myself, whatever that might mean for our marriage. That Friday night, Emily was bustling around the house, packing her bag with an energy that both intrigued and infuriated me. I could hear the rustle of fabric and the clatter of her shoes as she flitted between the bedroom and the living room. I remained in the kitchen, pretending to work on dinner, though I was barely focused on the task at hand. I could feel her excitement like a tangible thing, and it made my skin crawl. When she finally emerged, her arms filled with clothes, she glanced over at me. "You okay? You've been awfully quiet." I looked up, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. "Yeah, just trying to wrap my head around everything." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "What's there to wrap your head around? It's just a weekend getaway. You'll hardly notice I'm gone, except that you're not just going on a trip. You're going on a trip with him," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. "That's not nothing, Emily." She dropped her clothes onto the bed with a huff. "I wish you'd stop acting like this is the end of the world. I'm just trying to find some joy in my life. By throwing away our marriage? That seems extreme." I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "What about the promises we made? What about our life together?" Emily crossed her arms, her expression turning defensive. "I'm not throwing anything away. I just want to explore my options." "Is that so wrong, exploring your options while I sit here and wait?" "Yes, Emily, that is wrong," I replied, my voice raising with every word. "You can't just act like this is normal behavior," she sighed, shaking her head. "You're being so dramatic. It's just a weekend." "Then why does it feel like a betrayal?" I said, stepping closer. "You think I want to feel this way? That I want to be sitting here questioning everything we've built? It hurts. I don't want to hurt you," she said softly, her voice laced with frustration and a hint of guilt. "But I need to do this for myself. Selfishness doesn't equal self-discovery," I replied, feeling a wave of anger surge through me. "You're being selfish, Emily. And when you leave, don't think I'll just be waiting for you to come back." The air grew heavy with tension, a silence settling between us as we both processed the weight of my words. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, peering into the abyss of our collapsing marriage. "You can't keep threatening me," she finally said, her voice a mix of anger and hurt. "This isn't how we should be handling things, and yet here we are," I replied, my tone colder than intended. "You're making choices that have real consequences. If you decide to go through with this trip, I won't be here when you come back." "Is that really what you want?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "To end our marriage over this?" I paused, the weight of her question hanging heavily in the air. "I don't want to end our marriage, but I can't stand by and watch you destroy it. You're pushing me away with every decision you make." She stared at me, her eyes searching mine for any hint of hope, but all I felt was an overwhelming sense of finality. The line had been drawn. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I watched as she finished her packing, the atmosphere in the house thick with unspoken words. The tension was palpable, a heavy cloud looming over us. I felt like I was standing in the eye of a storm, waiting for the inevitable chaos to arrive. As she zipped up her suitcase, I took a deep breath and turned to her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure," she replied firmly, not meeting my eyes. "I need this, Tom. You know what I said about the locks," I reminded her, trying to gauge her reaction. "I know," she replied, finally meeting my gaze. "And I don't think it's fair. You can't control my actions like this. It's not control. It's self-preservation," I said, my heart racing. "I can't sit here and watch you treat our relationship like a game." Her expression softened momentarily, but the resolve in her eyes remained. "I'm not trying to hurt you, but you need to understand that I have to do this for myself." With that, she walked past me, her suitcase rolling behind her like a silent reminder of the choices she was making. I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill, but I swallowed hard, determined not to show weakness. I stood in the doorway, watching as she left. The door clicked shut behind her, and in that moment, I felt a part of myself break. I knew I had to follow through on my decision. I was done waiting, done allowing her to dictate the terms of our relationship. Later that day, I took my phone out and texted Matt. "Tom, can we meet up? I need to talk." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a response. "Matt, sure. The usual place?" "Tom, yeah? I'll be there in an hour." As I arrived at the bar, the familiar hum of conversation enveloped me, but I felt out of place. I found Matt sitting at our usual spot, a beer already waiting for me. He looked up and gave me a sympathetic nod. You look like you've been through hell, he said as I slid onto the stool. I feel like I have, I replied, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Emily left for the weekend, and it feels like my whole world is crumbling. Matt leaned in, concern etched on his face. Have you thought more about what you want to do? I have, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm changing the locks. I can't let her come back like nothing happened. Are you sure that's the right move? He asked cautiously. That might push her further away. I don't care, I shot back, the anger bubbling over again. She's made her choice. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's clearly not. Matt nodded slowly. I get it. But just be prepared for the fallout. This could get messy. Messy? It already is, I replied, bitterness creeping into my voice. I just want to reclaim my life. If she thinks she can just waltz back in, she's mistaken. As I took a long sip of my beer, I felt a strange mix of clarity and despair wash over me. The path I had chosen was fraught with uncertainty, but I knew deep down that there was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, I would face it head on. I had to stand my ground, even if it meant losing everything I thought I once had.